parliament is something which is a unique starting, which is done by PSR, but it has been taken up by Parliament of India. Now Parliament is in association with PSR is doing all this, and they are providing opportunities to students who are in JNU, who are in DU, who are in Allahabad, Lucknow, or national or universities or best of the colleges, who are appearing after graduation in this particular test and qualifying, and then they are recruited as assistants, as research assistants to the members of parliament in Parliament of India. So it is always a lucrative 1-year job which you are doing in the best of in the highest places of our country. You are meeting with the highest, most powerful people in our country, and you are involved in the most powerful work of the society and legal system, which is lawmaking. So many times you are working with an MP who is drafting a single one-member bill, or any kind of money bill, or any kind of legislative work which he is doing for his department, for his ministry. And you are involved in all that research, you are involved in all that work, you are involved in legislative process, you are involved in legislative research, you are involved in critiquing of what the bill is placed in the parliament, you are involved in question framing for or question answers that you frame for those people who are sitting and speaking in the parliament. So you are somehow going to be known, or you are in the you are going to be working. Yani, this is the topmost work in our society which is possible. I mean, litigation or judging is the last thing that happens. Courts are seen as the last resort. Litigation is seen as the last resort. The first thing that happens in any society is lawmaking. So you are in the first and primary thing in this society. So you are at the top. Parliament is the topmost body in our country. So you are at the top. You are working with the top people who are nominated in Rajya Sabha, who are elected in the Lok Sabha. So for 1 year long, you are in the corridors of the parliament, even when you are not elected, even when you are not accountable to the people. You are only doing, you are only turning, you are only listening, you are only writing, researching, interning yourself, and making all contacts and your future perspectives. And it does not end there. If it closes by 1 year, if your LAMP scholarship ends by 1 year, it is not the end of your career in policy research. It is the starting point, rather. As I was telling you while I was making announcement, that every government, every political party is having their policy research group nowadays. Every government department is having a policy research group nowadays. Every big corporation in India, Tata Sons, Reliance, or be it Bajaj or Birla or Adani, or even I'm close to someone who is in the policy research in Wilmar, which is one of the topmost producers of oil in the world. And then it does not end here. You transcend to other countries and United Nations bodies. And there are NGOs who are working in association with United Nations, because a lot of work of United Nations goes to international level non-government organizations who work in association with the United Nations. And they cater the mandate of United Nations in first world countries, second world countries, third world countries. Last month, I was one of the panelists to the placement interview of various candidates which were taking place for an NGO who was working with United Nations, and there were candidates from 13 countries. And I was one of the panelists because there were candidates from India. So they called me as one of the panelists, and I was interviewing all 13 country, almost 50, 60 candidates. And most of them were those who were from a law background, and they did not went any time in their law school, after their law school, into judiciary or litigation. They are all into think tank or policy research, or working with some NGOs, and they were working in as scholars, as researchers. They were all those applicants were like that. and they were given, and that NGO which was working with UN was giving or allowing to work not only for that organization, at the same time they were giving permission to work for 5 organizations. So it was good. I'm saying it is good in terms of your CV, your progression, your exposure, and then money as well, because they were doing 5 works at a time. They were giving, because they were only engaged for a few hours in a week, that these hours we will pay you for that particular time. And I was very excited to be part of that interview, because all the panelists from outside India, and they briefed me about all these things. That is why I'm telling you from my experience that how United Nations is employing those people who are into policy research and think tank and lot of non-governmental organizations, political parties, even international institutions, let it be WTO or any other WHO or any other organizations which is body of the UN or non-body of the UN, be it a European Union or anything. So I'm saying that policy research is not a dry career. Policy research is the highest career. And I tell you one example. The person which I don't say it because of the party line. I'm just saying because of the intellectual base that a person is having. Jairam Ramesh and Shashi Tharoor, they are all from that perspective. They are not, both of them are not lawyers, but they are someone who are from that perspective. Mr. Rajan also, who was a professor at America, and then he went into the World Bank. So even currently, the chief of the World Bank is Indian origin, and she's from America. She's a thorough scholar. So I'm saying that scholarly work and think tank and policy research is something which is every organization, every setup, which is, because nothing in this world is out of regulations. Everything is within the regulations. So either you are drafting the regulation or you are bound by regulations. Whether you are drafting or not, even then you are bound of regulation. So to understand those regulations and to draft your own policy to follow those regulations or compliances. So if you are, so I'm known to an organization which is one of the most biggest planters of coffee in the world. Coffee plantations. They have as big plantations in different continents as the city of Delhi. State of Delhi. इतने बड़े उनके plantations हैं. Lakhs of hectares. They used to do rain in their plantations by helicopters. They have helicopters for their own plantation. So this kind of organization require policy persons to start working in any other country, that to understand the policy and then talk to the policy makers that how the policy can be viable for them to have a joint venture. So I'm saying that this is a bright career. And if you have a passion towards reading, writing, critiquing, and to be kind of working as an ambassador and walking in the corridors of power and negotiating in the power circle. If you have seen the movie Quantum of Solace, I still remember the antagonist in the Quantum of Solace was a policy research scholar. If you have not seen, see the movie. He was an environmentalist, and he was negotiating about water from multiple countries in the world, and he was a scholar of water laws in the world. And although he was antagonist, turned out to be antagonist, but he was a policy thinker. I'm saying that. So इतना लोगों ने actually judiciary को लेके, हमने खुद judiciary को, वकालत को, और इतना हमने, और UPSC को हमने इतना बढ़ा दिया है, इतना उसके, although it is all because of, might be slightly because of corruption, कि ये जो नई चीजें आ रही हैं, जो बहुत अच्छे कैरियर्स हैं, जिसमें बहुत सफाई है, जिसमें बहुत एक्सपोजर है, जिसमें आपकी पर्सनालिटी का बहुत बड़ा पार्ट है. Being a judge, you are completely out of under the wheel. Your personality is completely merged into the gown. You don't, you are not out of, your personality is not exposed at all. So, but this policy work is something which give you dimensions, which give you perspective, which is a kind of people know you by your name. So I'm advocating this because if anyone have a passion towards reading, writing, and scholarly work, and even if you don't have that, you just want to be an IAS officer, you just want to be a advocate, you just want to be a judge, you just want to be a good lawyer or corporate lawyer, even then pursuing LAMP is going to be very useful for you, because you are going to have contacts, you are going to have a perspective of doing work. So I requested my present friend and past student Praveer Singh Srivastava, who has been LAMP scholar in 2016-17, to take a session with बेटा कार अभी रोक दीजिए आप अपनी, लेट मी टेक अ सेशन, ठीक है, उधर जाके चला लो. So I requested Mr. Praveer Srivastava to take a session, because I always try my best to cater to the requirement of providing guidance to all of you for your career perspectives, and whatever logistic requirement, whatever opportunities, whatever other requirements that is required, we are ready to do all that as well, anytime, anywhere, or of any quantum. So Mr. Praveer Singh Srivastava has been legislative and policy advisor to members of parliament during 2016 and 17. He has been there, and he works as legal, legislative, and policy consultant to many members of parliament even after that. So he did not stop even during after completion of his LAMP fellowship. He continued to do that, and he's currently doing all that to many members of parliament across the party lines in various places, in various areas. He has been chief advisor, legislative and policy, at the office of Mr. Rajiv Satav, member of parliament, Lok Sabha, from 2017 to 2019, 2 years. In his current role, Mr. Praveer is responsible for handling the parliamentary policy and political advisory related matters to various members of parliament. He is a graduate of Symbiosis Law School, Noida, in the first batch of Symbiosis 2010-15. He also holds LLM degree from Gujarat National Law University, Gandhinagar, which is again on constitutional law and administrative law, which is which is a academic side of the policy research. After his post-graduation, he has been selected for the prestigious LAMP Fellowship, where he worked with a member of parliament who is from the current ruling party. So beyond what he has been doing during his LAMP Fellowship, he has always been continuing to do the same work, and he's enjoying that work. This is important, that we have to do what we enjoy, and when we do what we enjoy, we don't take it as a burden. We always take it as an enjoyment, and we always proceed and progress in those things as a matter of pride, not as a matter of duty only. So I'm really thankful to Mr. Praveer for accepting our invitation and joining us today for an important session, and giving and ready to give important insights with respect to his progress as a policy and think tank person, and also how our current student, a lot of current students, and can be future LAMP scholars or future think tank or future policy critique or policy service providers to the world at large. Now, before we start a formal, this is going to be a interactive session. I would be putting up various questions to Mr. Praveer, and he will be speaking, he will be answering, and he will be clarifying various aspects on those questions. And before I start on to ask him any question, I would now first request Mr. Praveer Srivastava to explain or elaborate his experience from law school to LAMP scholarship, a LAMP fellowship to till date. What is his take on kind of last 5 years? Because we are sitting on in 2021, and he started all that in 2015 while he passed out from law school. So how does he see his 5 years of law school?
First of all, good evening to everybody. I understand it's a little late in the year, but I wish everybody a very happy new year, and especially to sir. I understand that most of the people who are attending this session are from the last year, so I hope this year is far more important for them. So I wish them all the luck and success for this year. And since sir has laid the background for what I do, what are the perspectives attached to it, and a lot of things that I would want to further elaborate upon in the later part of the session. But a lot of things have been clarified by sir, so he has made my task a bit easier for explaining to everybody what is the kind of work that I do. And speaking about my journey, as sir has asked, that it's been 5 years since I passed out of law school, and now that I started my own work and been in this field for the last probably 4 years. So initially, I remember that it was also, I'll say, a blessing of a lot of wonderful professors. One of which being sir, that I had exposure to a lot of things. And during my law school, I was always clear on one aspect, that before I pass out, I should analyze and shortlist my options as to what I wish to do. Because I saw a lot of my batchmates, they were very clear since the first year that they wanted to be in litigation, or they wanted to be in a corporate firm, or they wanted to be a judge, or they wanted to go for UPSC. So sometimes I was also a bit worried that why is my line of action not clear till now? Why am I into the fact that I'm trying to explore a lot of things? But later in the part, by the end of my fifth year, I remember I was placed with a law firm and an in-house company at that point of time. But somewhere I thought that, and it was also because a bit of guidance from my parents, that they thought that I should study a bit more and complete my education and extend my degree of what I've taken this one. So in that thing, I applied for the LLM examination predominantly because at that point of time the CLAT examination was also holding recruitments for public sector undertakings for their assistant legal advisors. So my first intent was to apply for that PSUs, because normally it is so that PSC jobs are far more comfortable. They offer you a lot of security. It's a government job, so you have a lot of stability in your life. So I'd applied for that PSU job, and subsequently I got a good rank, and I managed to get admission to Gujarat National University. So I made a decision that, okay, in the fitness of that, I study for one more year, do a specialization in constitution, because it was one of my favorite subjects during law school also. So I then decided that, okay, I'll take up this course now, and for 1 year I did my LLM, and it was an eye opener for me, because coming from a private law school, there were a lot of aspects about a national law university which a lot of us are not very clear about. So that 1 year experience with the National Law University is something that taught me, I'll say, the best of both the worlds, of studying in a good law school from the private sector and a reputed national law university. During my time at GNLU, I remember it's a very funny coincidence that I was in GNLU. You have a notice board. So in notice board, they stick all the prospective applications that you can make, or if there are any career opportunities. So they had pasted a poster of the LAMP fellowship. So I was just casually walking through the corridor, and I knew about the LAMP fellowship because most of our law students are aware of PRS, because obviously PRS provides a lot of extensive research material on laws and lawmaking. So if you go to the PRS website, all the law students once or more than one times have always been through or accessed the PRS website, because it gives a lot of information, and it is probably the only portal in India where you get a briefs on a lot of legislation that are taking place, updates on the parliament or what the parliamentarians are doing. And the best thing that PRS hosts is that they host that how the MP or MLA is performing. What is his performance? How much questions has he asked? What is his attendance? How many debates has he raised? So that it's like a PRS acts like a report card for a lot of members of parliament. Because now what happens that the people of every constituency are becoming more aware with the advent of social media. Earlier, I believe that if I go 5-10 years down back in the days, people while choosing their representatives are more concerned that whether he comes to attend their birthday parties, their marriage ceremonies, or whether he comes to if somebody dies in their family, if he's available at that particular occasion, then he gets a lot of votes. That was, I think, one of the biggest deciding factor to vote a member of parliament or a member of legislative assembly was his accessibility. But what we tend to forget is the fact that that person has been chosen to speak about your issues that you are facing in your constituency in the highest body of the country, whether it's the parliament at the central level or whether it's the state legislature at the state level. So what people didn't tend to understand that they thought that okay, associating with an MP or MLA is a matter of pride if he attends your social functions in your family. But what is he doing as an MP? What is he raising? Whether he's speaking or not, whether he's putting your issues across the board in a far effective or far vocal manner or not. That is something what PRS has brought about a revolution that people are now starting to look at how the MP is performing. So an MP, I was also in conversation with one of the members of parliament, and I jokingly said that, sir, you people have to give an exam every 5 years, but now with the advent of this PRS, you also have what we call a semester system, that every year your marking is done. Every year people are watching your, how you are performing, what are your grades, how many questions have you asked, what have you done. So I think this transparency that PRS has brought about, it's a brilliant, I'll say move, and it was I'll say PRS has been very vocal, and the initiative that they have taken is something that has, I was also watching what was happening in USA in the morning, and I heard a panelist and one of the news channels said that we tend to, somehow a lot of we show a lot of love for US politics. We feel a lot of pride about knowing what is going on in US elections, US presidential election. Joe Biden is winning, Donald Trump is losing. I've seen people expressing a lot of views about US election when the result came out. But if I talk about how, our Indian polity works, I feel that our Indian polity is far more diverse and far more interesting to study about than any other country. And the factor and the the best example of is that we are definitely a mature democracy, but we are an immature electorate. The electorate is still something that has not risen or is very much aware of what are the responsibilities of an MP or an MLA. So while I was just continuing, while I was walking through the corridors, I saw a poster of the Lamb Fellowship, and it detailed. I had read about the Lamb Fellowship earlier, but I had not chosen to pursue that particular field at that point of time. But when I saw that, I thought of let's apply, let's see how it goes about. So, and incidentally, it was also I was fortunate enough that when I was applying for the Lamb Fellowship, the Aadhaar debate was going on, and the Aadhaar and the right to privacy also happened to be the topic of my dissertation at that point of time. So, because I was reading a lot about Aadhaar, so I had a very deep understanding of how privacy works. So that helped me a lot in framing my, which I'll elaborate in the later part of the session, in framing my statement of purpose and also my policy article. So I applied for the fellowship when I was in the second semester of my master's course, and gradually by March, I think in the 1st of April, I got a confirmation email that I've been selected for the fellowship, and then I chose to take that forward, and I joined the fellowship, and the fellowship started off in June. And the most important factor that I considered while taking, because obviously working with politicians in this country is still considered a big, somebody is, people are not very keen, or people are very skeptical of working with parliamentarians or politicians. But that was a leap of faith, or there was a lot of, courage that I had to take, because I saw a lot of my batchmates, someone working with Amarchand, someone working in DSK, someone doing good in litigation. So always there was a sense of, a sense of, I'll say insecurity also, I can say, but there was a sense of not being very clear about what to do. But once I stepped into this fellowship, and now that I compare a lot of things with my batchmates, I see that there is something of a kind of a value addition that I'm doing. Because it's also funny that whenever I go to parties or go to my get-togethers with my friends, the topic of discussion is politics. So once you sit with your friends, obviously you feel like an authoritative person that you can talk about something that a lot of people would be knowing insights about. So essentially, has been my journey. It was, I'll say that a very a choice that I took, and a gamble that I played. I'll say that, and that gamble has played off till now, and I hope it also goes on at a very decent pace in the future. But my recommendation to all of you, everybody who's watching this session, is that what we don't tend to understand is that until and unless you do not scrutinize or analyze a particular profession, you will never know the pros and cons of it. We as law students, I'll say that in my case also, when I was also a law student, we were trained in that fashion that okay, after law school, either you go to litigation or you go to corporate. That was the only thing we are taught. So I think somewhere our education of law, legal education, was based like engineering only. In engineering also, you are told that either you take mechanic or you take civil because these are evergreen streams of engineering. Rest all streams are up and down. IT might be relevant tomorrow, or today not relevant tomorrow. But mechanical and engineering are something that are going to be, mechanical and civil are something that are going to be relevant throughout, till the time this humankind is going to be existent, because machines are going to be there, buildings are going to be there. So these two streams are going to be very much in demand always. So what I thought that okay, it's always good to explore something that you are not not aware about. And why LAM fellowship was the perfect platform, because it's a very short duration fellowship. So you have a very, it doesn't stretch out to 2 or 3 years that you, at the end of in the middle of 1.5 years, you understand that okay, this is not meant for me. So you have a good 11 months to analyze and scrutinize as to whether you want to take that forward or not. So this has been my journey till now, sir, and I say that it has been a very entertaining and exciting journey till now for me.
Very well, thank you, Mr. Praveer. I would take up the second question, or let us directly move towards the LAM Fellowship, since we are having a workshop on LAM Fellowship. I would now want you to begin by explaining the students the concept of fellowship in India and how it is different from other forms of grants or scholarships which are incentive based scholarships.
So, as you rightly asked, that what there's a lot of confusion about what is a fellowship, what is a scholarship. So, students, tend to be a very pretty much in a lot of doubt as to whether one should, what is a fellowship, what does it offer, whether it is going to be a value addition to my CV, whether it is going to help me in the future or not. So, one of the very basic difference between a scholarship and a fellowship is that fellowship is basically mostly employment generated. You have an employee fellowships can be in a lot of categories. You have a research fellowship like you have with the GRF that is done by the UGC. You have an employment based fellowship of what the best example of which is the LAM fellowship, that it grants you a form of an employment along with a financial aid. So there are both of these aspects that are associated with it. And interestingly, when I was researching about what exactly fellowship means, the literal meaning of fellowship, so I was taken that the concept of fellowship is also present in the Holy Bible. If you read the Bible elaborates a lot on the concept of fellowship, meaning that it is a association of two people who share a general interest. That is what is reflected in the Bible, and that is what the literal interpretation of the word fellowship is. So, for in a layman's term, if I were to explain what exactly a fellowship is, it's mostly it's an on-the-job training. If I would want to put in a layman's term in simple language, it's mostly a on-the-job training thing where you are trained for something for a particular period of time, and you are also paid for it. Scholarship essentially is mostly education backed. So in scholarship, what happens that you will get a tuition fee waiver, you will get a fund for your research, but there's not employment generated with it. Here, what happens, the fellowship is a short-term course that you do, and that gives you a lot of perspective on a lot of avenues that happen. So it is something that I'll say that it's a hybrid of an employment and an internship. So you have both the aspects that are attached to it. You have a internship aspect because it has a limitation of a time period, and you have an employment attached because it's like a full time job. It is not something that is a short term thing that okay, like an internship, you come in the 9 in the morning, leave at 6 in the evening. There's no time span that is defined to your work, your work timelines or something like that. So I think the basic clarity that or basic benefit that a fellowship holds over a scholarship is the fact that it is more practical in nature. You learn a lot of practical aspects when you do a fellowship, while in a scholarship it's mostly theoretical. You do a lot of primary and secondary based research, but in a fellowship it's mostly practical.
Very well said, Mr. Praveer. Now I would take your attention to the third step, as the fellowship and scholarship is clarified, to take back us to the history of LAM and how it has actually attracted your attention and how it has benefited you.
See, the history of LAMP, it comes from a very exciting tour. So what happened back in 2009? There were three members of parliament. One was Mr. Kalikesh Singh Dev, who represented a constituency called Bolaneer in Orissa. One was Mr. Anurag Thakur, who happens to be the Minister of State for Finance now. And one was Mr. Jayant Chaudhary, who was a member of parliament from Mathura in 2009. So what happens when you are a parliamentarian? You have a lot of exchange programs like we have for students. So parliamentarians also have a study tour. So these three parliamentarians had gone for a study tour to the United States of America, where they interacted with a lot of senators, congressmen, people from both the houses of the U.S. Congress. So while interacting with a gentleman called John Kerry. So John Kerry, for the information of most of you, he was the Secretary of State when Mr. Barack Obama was the president from 2013 to 2017. A very distinguished war veteran, a very distinguished lawyer. So he was the Secretary of State at that point of time. So when they were interacting with Mr. John Kerry in United States of America, they also interacted with his research team. So he had a set of interns who provided research support to him. So while interacting with Mr. John Kerry, they came across that how efficient and how institutionalized the concept of research support is for US, the parliamentarians of United States. So they thought that obviously our United States being the oldest democracy and India being the largest democracy, we have close to 800 odd MPs and we cover for 545 Lok Sabha and 250 Rajya Sabha seats. So why is that in a democracy like India, why is it that the members of parliament do not have a research support? So once they came back to India, they thought that, okay, there should be an institutionalized concept, that there should be dedicated research staff for the members of parliament. So what happened then, that they approached Constitution Club of India and PRS Legislative Research to bringing a formal institutionalized pattern of selecting what we call as legislative assistants to member of parliament. So what happened in the first year in 2009, the PRS Constitution Club and these three MPs, they selected 12 LAMP fellows who assisted 12 different MPs from across party lines. It had Mr. Prakash Javadekar also, it had Mr. Piyush Goyal also, it had Mr. Kalikesh, Mr. Anurag Singh Thakur, and various MPs from both the parties. So they started off on a pilot basis. And based on that success in 2009, the fellowship became full-fledged and it went to PRS. And PRS started a full-fledged application process for recruiting LAMP fellows. So what happened that now, from 12, PRS started recruiting close to 50 to 55 people as LAMP fellows for every year. Now, what happened in this LAMP fellow for motivation perspective, as you said, in India, so the best part is that all of us, irrespective of whether we follow any political ideology or not, all of us have a political, we have a political sense of understanding. We are inherently political in whatever you do. I think if we have a DNA test of most of the Indians, you'll find somewhere, the strain of politics or the strain of understanding public life is present, whether in a dormant manner or in an active manner for everybody in India. So we are politically more aware as compared to other countries. We have a point of view. We know, we know a lot about politics. So what happened that I remember it was the phase of 2014-15 when we had the general elections and the BJP came into power. And I remember that BJP targeted the opposition, the then incumbent Congress government, on the plank of policy paralysis. So then I thought that when I saw the election results, and I thought that why has the electorate voted in such a huge number on a very small word or a very small concept called policy? Because if you see that throughout from 2011 to 2014, every news channel was displaying that UPA government has a policy paralysis. They are failing on the policy aspect. The government is not working fine. So when I did a bit of research, I understood that, okay, there is a whole institutionalized format in which policy formulation works in this country. And members of parliament form a very important part of that particular formulation. So when I went into a bit deep into that research, I understood that members of parliament has a lot of role to play, except for the fact that clicking selfies and posting videos with that electorate. There's a lot of work that they do. So that was what evoked my interest in the LAMP fellowship. And obviously, the problem with our representatives is that accessibility as a research support or getting attached to a member of parliament 5 years back was a difficult task. Because what I call it, there's a basic term in economics that is called an oligarchic market. where the players are less and the entry barriers are very high. So that was the case with MPs and MLAs also, because there was a very small window of entering and working with them. But since 2014, when you see, because and thanks to YouTube also, we have seen people getting a lot of recognition because of their speeches in the parliament. One case in point has been the MP from Ladakh, Mr. Jamyang, who gave a very fiery speech on Article 370, and that became a rage throughout India. Everybody saw what he spoke on. Or for that matter, now people have started understood. But what the speech that Atal Bihari Vajpayee gave back in 1997, when he resigned after the 13 days government, which is quoted by a lot of people now, that I'm resigning, I'm going to the president, and he gave a lot of he spoke about a lot of morals in politics, requirement of morals in politics, anti-defection, a lot of things. And now that we see that speech, we say, okay, oh wow, what a orator he was, how eloquently he spoke on such a complex issue. Then we understood that how important it is for a parliamentarian, because before 1998, the proceedings of the parliament were not televised. So MPs were also laid back that okay, nobody is watching. It's only among the press people are watching, and there's only against the closed doors. Everybody, nobody is watching. There's no accountability. But once and I remember Sushma Swaraj was the information and broadcasting minister who took this initiative to televise Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha TV. And now the public is the public. I have seen people sitting and watching Lok Sabha TV for the whole day to see what their members of parliament are doing. So, that is something that evoked a lot of interest in me to understand that how politics works in this country. Catering yourself to an ideology is a different thing, but understanding an institution is the most important and paramount thing that you need to take a sense of. So I think that was the most, I'll say, pushing and inspiring aspect of a LAM fellowship that because of which I chose to apply in that fellowship. And that is how this journey began.
Very well said, Mr. Praveer. I am really very excited to listen the background and history of how fellowship actually moved up and how it is actually catering to the modern day requirement of our country in terms of policy formation in our country. I would now turn up to the most important part of our session today, which is with respect to kindly explain the process of applying for the fellowship, the various stages of application, the eligibility of application, and the timelines of this LAM fellowship.
Yes, so now because this workshop is on the LAM fellowship and the poster that you posted, it had most of the eligibility criteria already on that. So I'll rush through that, how that process works. First of all, usually the LAM fellowship opens on the first week of January. It's usually the 31st of December or the 1st of January of every year. So the applications open. Now, before I move on to elaborating on the process, I'll just brief for everybody who's present here that there are two stages of the LAM fellowship. The first stage is the application process. The second stage is the interview process. So the applications open somewhere on 1st or 2nd of January, and you have close to 15 to 20 days in filling that application. Now, firstly, I'll come to what the application comprises. There are two aspects to that application. One is your minor details, and one is the two, I'll say the most clinching factor or the most important factor that, that make or break your chances to get through the LAM fellowship. So in your minor details, they'll ask you your name, your age, your graduation, and for the first eligibility to apply for the LAM fellowship is that you have to be a graduate or in your final year of, course, whatever course you're doing, whether BA, BBA, LLB. So you have to be, final year once you apply for the LAM fellowship. So that is the most important eligibility. The second eligibility, and that is one of the most innovative things, and that is something, PRS has very well thought about, is the age limitation. So you have to be below 25. So what happens that if you're below 25, you are, because when law school is a 5-year course or a 3-year course, if you're doing a 3-year course, you've already done your undergraduate for 3 years. So usually the people who apply for the LAM fellowship are in the age of 23 to 25, especially law students, because law students enter law school at the age of 17 and 18, or by the time they graduate, they are 22 or 23. So you are left with the other 2 years. So because of having an age limit of 25, what happens that you are in a situation that you can explore things. Because once you move after 25, you have a lot of things to consider in life. Your economics, your financial stability, your future plans, your aspirations, your family plannings. A lot of things have to be taken care once you move into that zone of 25 to 30. So all your experimentation mentality can only happen till you are at the age of 24 or 25. So that is the best thing that the LAM Fellowship does, that they have an eligibility or a limitation that only below 25 years people can apply. So what happens, you have fresh graduates that come into the LAM Fellowship. So now explaining the process of the fellowship, the first is that they'll ask you for your minor details, your graduation, your CGPA, your course that you're enrolled in, your date of birth. So these are minor details that everybody can fill. There is no specialized, you know, tips that are needed for that. Now coming to the second point, which is the most important thing that will make or break your fellowship application or help you in, breaking through the LAM Fellowship. The first is the statement of purpose, which is a 500 word article. Your second is a 500 word piece on a policy or legal issue of contemporary relevance. So first comes your statement of purpose. Now statement of purpose, and also for the information of a lot of you, since I've been involved in taking interviews also for the LAM Fellows in the last 3 years. So it has also been, I have been lucky enough to understand process of both evaluating the application and evaluating the interview process. So in the application, while I take the interviews of a lot of people, what I've seen that in the application, once you write your statement of purpose, you should be very clear as to why do you want this LAM Fellowship to, how is it going to help you in your career progression. So, for example, I read a lot of SOPs where they said that they want to go for UPSC, and they want a stopgap arrangement for 1 year. Right, that's why they're applying for the LAM Fellowship, because they want to be appearing for UPSC in the future. So I jokingly asked them that, okay, you want to appear in UPSC in the future, and you want to work with politicians. And let's understand that these are two people who fight the most. The bureaucrats and the politicians, they are always at loggerheads, right? So you are trying to get into two different territories. You want to go for UPSC, but you want to appear into LAM because it is a stopgap arrangement for 1 year. It will pay you a stipend, and for 11 months you'll have a schedule. Please understand that this is a full-time thing. This is not a sort of if you get, and let me also tell you that the probably what I should say about it, that it is the most toughest fellowship also of this country. The reason being that most of the fellowships do not have a homogeneous kind of applications. There are people from particular sectors who will apply. For LAM Fellowship, it is very heterogeneous. For example, in my batch, when I was a LAM Fellow, we had engineers from IIT Kanpur, we had people from NLSIU Bangalore, we had people from SRCC, we had people from LSR. So it was such a diverse bunch of people that once I got into fellowship, I understood that how fortunate I have been to make through such people who belong to such premier colleges. So, that gives you a sense of achievement also, that you have made to the 50 people out of the hot 2,500 applications that come from all over the country. So the selection ratio is somewhere close to 1:50. So that makes it, more, it becomes more difficult for anybody to get through the fellowship. So always remember, if you are applying for the fellowship, always be very clear of why do you want this fellowship to happen. I want to pursue a career in policy research at later point of time. I've always been inspired, and I've always been, I've always seen and looked up to politicians. I've always interested in understanding the politics of this country. So they said that, okay, while the interview was happening, they asked me that, okay, politics is good, but why do you want to take up LAM Fellowship if you don't wish to get into active politics? Right? Because a lot of people say that, okay, if you want. But what we need to understand, that there is something called passive politics also. You are working behind the scenes now. Just that is the case that is the case for a judge or an advocate or a solicitor. We have the concept of an advocate and a solicitor. A solicitor doesn't argue in the court, but he prepares all the background material to prepare for the attorney to argue that. That is the system in a lot of common law countries. In Bombay High Court also, you see the practice of solicitor and attorney still prevalent. So that is how a LAM Fellowship also functions. So my recommendation on your statement of purpose will always be that please ensure that you are very concrete with your explanation about why do you want to join the LAM Fellowship, how it is going to further your progression. For example, if you write that you want to approach, or you want to apply for the LAM Fellowship because you want to work with a political party, that makes a lot of sense because it is a chain reaction. You work with the MP, you understand politics, you understand parliament, and then you go on to work with a political party. Now, if you write that I want to appear for judiciary, that is why I'm sitting for LAM, that doesn't make any sense, right? Because you will be because please understand one thing: the job of the MP is very hectic, right? If you are going to give him excuses that I want to prepare for my judiciary examination, please let me off today early, that is going to give a very bad impact on the MP itself. Why I'm saying why the job of an MP is difficult, because a member of parliament represents an average electorate of 20 to 25 lakh people. An average constituency of a Lok Sabha has 20 to 25 lakh people, out of which close to 60% are, form the electorate or the voters. And the job of a member of parliament is to cater to the needs and demands of both the people who have voted for him or who have not voted for him. He doesn't have an option that if somebody comes on his doorstep and says, please get my work done, he'll say that you have not voted for me, so I'll not get your work done. You have to cater to a lot of people. He has a lot of responsibilities to discharge. So if you're going to do it in a half-hearted manner, that is not going to help. So in your statement of purpose, whenever you write, obviously, and one very important thing because as law students, we have an upper hand in the fellowship. Because close to out of 50 people every year, I have seen that close to 15 to 16 LAM fellows are from the law background. So law fellows usually have an upper hand because we have a far more understanding of policy and legislations than somebody from engineering or social sciences. So that gives us an upper hand. So always justify that fact that you are a lawyer. That is why the LAM fellowship is going to help you. Because you have read about policy, you have read about legislation, you have read about the constitution, you have read about the parliament. So you have a basic understanding of how things are going to work about it. So two things always keep in mind. First, always associate your background as a law student to justify your statement of purpose. Secondly, justify that how LAM fellowship is going to help you achieve your future goals. So this is the first aspect that you want to that you should keep in mind before you apply for the statement of purpose. The second factor comes the policy article. Now, why does the policy article assumes immense importance? Because once you go to the interview, the policy article is the basis on which they are going to grill you to understand your knowledge about the subject. So always bear this one very important thing in mind. When you write a policy article, do not go for something, do not follow the bandwagon or write something that looks very fancy to you. Just because farm laws protest is fancy, just because data protection is fancy, just because CA is fancy, do not go into it unless you do not have a deep understanding of that subject. If you are writing farm laws, if you today write out, tomorrow you lie, because there's a lot of discussion going on the farm laws, the aspect that government should roll it back. If you write on farm laws, understand the fact that you have to justify that what is the dispute about this? What are the pros and cons about the farm laws? If the interviewer has a question to you that the central government is not capable of bringing these laws because agriculture is a state subject. If you do not understand that, if you don't have a knowledge of whether agriculture is a state subject or not, then what are you going to do? Right? So the interviewer who's sitting there is a panel of interviews. It's not that it's one person who's going to interview. There are three people who are going to interview you. So the panel who's going to interview are from diverse backgrounds and they can put any question to you. So you have to be very aware of what you are writing. You have to be very confident and very much in depth into that subject. Don't write something because you have a shallow understanding of it. Because he'll immediately pinpoint that you have given the wrong answer. So for example, if you are writing on the CA, for example, because it's been a very burning topic. So if you're writing on the CA, you have to know what the Assam Accord is. What was the negotiation between Rajiv Gandhi and Assam Gana Parishad and Praful Manta? You have to understand that what the Supreme Court has ordered about NRC. You have to understand what is the difference between CA and NRC. A lot of people are still not clear about what is CA, what is NRC. These are two different things that operate in two different spheres, right? So once you write a policy article, always ensure, because it's a 500-word article, you are not writing a research paper of 3,000 words. It is a 500-word article, so you have to be very concise about it. You cannot go overboard, you have to stick to the point. So if you're writing about data protection, for example, so you'll say that, okay, India is a country which is developing by leaps and bounds in terms of IT infrastructure. So data protection is a need of the hour because we are seeing a lot of data breaches that are happening. So if we have to control data breaches, we need a data protection law. But when we need a data protection law, we also have to balance it with the right to privacy. Because data is a very private concern. It is not the government has to decide when it can expose the data of an individual to the public and when it can keep it discreet. So whenever you write a policy article, always structure it in the form that it has to have an introduction, it has to have a conclusion also. You don't have to give a summary of a topic. Everybody knows the summary, everybody knows what CA is, but you have to tell him that always adopt a neutral stand. That okay, this is the pros, this is the cons, and I need to understand that how this is going to happen. So this is the second step of the policy article. And the final stage is once you write, because the deadline for applying for both of these is 17th of Jan this year. So by 17th of Jan, you have to apply for the fellowship articles. Once you are through with these fellowship article, the article and the SOP, then you move on to the interview process. That happens from the 1st of March to the last week of March. Okay. And the best part with PR is that it gives you an option of coming for an in-house interview, in-person interview, or a telephonic interview. Now they have a Zoom call interview also in place. Okay, so there is no issue there. Don't be skeptical of the fact that if you give a Zoom call interview, your chances of getting selected, are not that high as in an in-person interview. Because my interview was a telephonic, because at that point of time we didn't have Zoom, there was no WhatsApp calling, there was only Skype. So we had a telephonic interview. So whether it's a telephonic interview or it's an in-person interview, your chances are bright only depending on your SOP and your policy article. So be very thorough with both of them. And the third aspect that you need to be that you should be aware of political developments. You are going into the LAMP fellowship where you have to assist a member of parliament. If you are not aware of basic political developments, there is no point of applying for the fellowship. I'm not asking you to be politically inclined, I'm asking you to be politically aware. These are two different distinctions that you need to follow. So, always bear in mind, once you apply for the fellowship and get selected, never go with a biased opinion. Never have an opinion that, okay, X party is good, Y party is bad, this organization good, that organization bad. Explore the thing, work as a researcher. And I am also reminded of what Ram Jethmalani used to say whenever somebody asked him that why do you defend criminals and people who have been involved in financial impropriety. He used to say that my job is to defend my client, my job is not to decide whether he's guilty or not. So your job as a LAMP fellow is to research and give him support and help him with his research stuff rather than deciding whether he belongs to a good party or a bad party. So always bear that in mind. And the final stage of the fellowship application is the LAMP interview. So the LAMP interview happens in front of a panel of 3 people and they are from diverse backgrounds. In the interview process, two things I'll always recommend people to take care of. One, that be very thorough with political developments of at least the last 6 months. Follow what has happened in the parliament predominantly, because the budget happens in February, right? So you have to be aware of the budget at least, not anything else. I'm not asking you to go into the finances of the government of India, but understand that what announcements were in the budget, what elections happened recently, what were the results, what happened. So these are the basic things that you need to keep in mind, number one. And number two, be very thorough with your SOP and your policy article. Try and go as much as in-depth information about, because additional information is always helpful. So be very thorough with your policy article, be very thorough with your statement of purpose, and be very clear on what you wish to do. And one more thing, sir, I saw somebody raising a hand in the meeting. I'll also, whatever questions you have, I'll take all the questions at the end. I see a lot of questions being posted in the chat box also. So whatever questions you have, you can post it, and in the end, sir and I will take it up. And I'll, one by one, I'll answer all your queries in the end.
Sure. Thank you. I was about to take your take your attention towards the question. No problem. So we will take the questions in the end. But I must have to appreciate how lucidly and how in detail you have already explained the various stages about the application and eligibility and timeline, and how one has to draft his or her SOP and article. So by that we are in a position to understand many things. I would now turn towards the I think application side is almost over from our side, because it is completely dealt in detail. Now I would take your attention towards the working of the LAMP fellow. I mean, what is the routine of LAMP fellow? How 24 hours of work LAMP fellow goes to work?
Uh, for this, sir, there was a very interesting joke that was going on in our Lamb Fellowship group. That when you are not a Lamb Fellow, you have 4 seasons in mind: summer, winter, autumn, and spring. Once you become a Lamb Fellow, you have 3 seasons in mind: monsoon, budget, and winter. Right. So for me now, for the past 4 months, I do not look whether what is the climate. For me, the year is divided into monsoon, budget, and winter session. That is how our year is our whole work culture or our whole work aspect is bifurcated into. So the lamb fellow, first of all, the most important part of a lamb fellow's job. And so one thing that I would want to put out as a disclaimer or as a piece of information is that a lamb fellow has to be very proactive. Right. This is not a fellowship where you will expect that the MP is going to walk to you and give you work. You have to run after him because he has several other duties that he has to discharge. Lamb Fellowship forms just 1% of his work. 99% of his work is either inclined towards the parliament, his constituency, his elections. There are a lot of things that happen in the politician's office on a daily basis. So first thing first, that you have to be very proactive once you are a Lamb Fellow. If you are not going to be proactive, you are going to sit in the office and wait for the MP to come and give you work. This fellowship is not for you. If you are an introvert, you have to take that hesitant. You have to take out that factor of being hesitant out of your habit and get into the habit of being proactive. Because what I have seen, because a lot of Lamb Fellows complain about the fact that my MP is not accessible. Now, for example, if somebody is allotted as an MP like Jyotiraditya Scindia. Now, Jyotiraditya Scindia, if I work to clarify or bifurcate, he's a celebrity. He's no less than a celebrity in terms of politicians. Right. So many people call him that he's like the Shah Rukh Khan of the parliament. Right. Has a very, very royal background, has a very strong lineage from which he comes into, very well educated, Stanford educated person, has his own constituency issues to battle with, is a very prolific speaker. You hear him out in English or Hindi, speaks very flawlessly on a wide myriad range of issues. For that matter, Mr. Asaduddin Owaisi. Now, for that person, I can very easily say that he is probably one of the most well-read, one of the most hospitable, one of the most well-behaved politician I've come across. Irrespective of what the media shows, because see, understand one thing, that what politicians do in the Lok Sabha in front of the TV is role play. That is not their actual side of life. Please do not mistake that if Sambit Patra is shouting on the TV channels on the top of his voice and singing and doing jokes, that is what he does in his normal life. That is not the case. So there's a very strong sense of resemblance between Bollywood actors and politicians. Both are very different on screen and very different off screen. Right. So please understand that how they kind of portray themselves on social media or broadcast themselves, they are entirely different from what they are in real life. So what we need to understand, that first thing, you have to be very proactive. Second, if I talk about the routine of a Lamb Fellow, you have a very interesting routine, because see, the proceedings of the parliament usually start at 11 o'clock in the morning. Now, for most of the parliamentarians, what happens, that when the parliament session is on, I'll bifurcate my answer into two parts. One, during the parliament session. One, when the parliament is not working. These are the two point of time or two time periods when you have to work with an MP. So when the parliament is in session, what happens? The parliament sits at 11 o'clock. Now, during the parliament, most of the MPs are there in their constituency. In Delhi. Most of the MPs are in Delhi. So people start flowing in from 7 o'clock in the morning. 7 o'clock in the morning, you will have all the people from his constituency, media persons coming in, people from various NGOs coming in, people from a lot of civil society organizations walking in. So everybody starts flocking in at 7 in the morning. Okay. So by the time I have come across cases that I have reached the MP's office by 9:30, 10 o'clock, and the office is full. I have to stand outside. There is no seating space. You have tens of cameramen and reporters waiting with the mic, and the cameraman sitting sipping a cup of tea, discussing various issues. But the most interesting part of that meeting or that people flocking is that you understand a lot about human interaction, because you have so diverse background. Because I remember when I was working with a BJP member of parliament, a mukhia used to come at 9 o'clock in the morning and sit till 12 in the night until he was served dinner, tea, everything, and he used to do nothing except sit in the office and call everybody from the MP's landline number, just to save his mobile balance. That is the job that he used to do, right? There is a lot of humor involved. There's a lot of exciting people that walk into the office. So you'll meet so much of myriad and so much of different I'll say categories of people, and what we in English, what in Hindi we call namunas, that are characters that you come across, whether it is the news reporters, whether it are people, and there are a lot of people from NGOs and civil society organizations who will come to lobby for their particular cause. That, sir, we are raising this menstrual hygiene, we would want you to raise this in the parliament, we want you to raise for child rights, for women's rights, for anything other debatable topics. So what happens, the MP's office is always filled. You will never find an MP's office empty unless he comes out and scolds everybody to go away. That he cannot do, right? And that is why I remember when one of the lectures that I was taking previously in one college, somebody told me that bureaucrats, this country is going into bad, it's going down because of politicians and this and that, bureaucrats are efficient. So I just asked them that, tell me one thing, that if a bureaucrat refuses to do your work, do you have any grievance redressal mechanism for that? But if your member of parliament or MLA doesn't listen to you, you have the option of exercising your vote tomorrow, right? He is accountable every 5 years. He is not sitting there for the next till the age of retirement. He is going to be there for the next 5 years, and he is accountable to whatever the public says. Obviously, he has his limitations in getting the work done, because there is a lot of hierarchy in that, and he has to pursue, and he has to take initiatives to get the work done of his electorate. If he doesn't do that, he is not going to get elected in the next time. So that is one very interesting facet that I learned. And once you walk into the MP's office, it's all crowded. You have people in the media, and the best part is that everybody recognizes the Lam fellow, right? So I have seen people from the media, from very distinguished, from ANI and every people, when they see a young person sitting in formals on a laptop doing something, they'll immediately say, okay, are you a Lam fellow? You don't even need to introduce yourself. They'll point out and they'll say, okay, you are a Lam fellow, right? Yes, I'm a Lam fellow. Okay, this is how you work. So everybody is aware of of what Lam fellows are. So that is the very big advantage of this fellowship, that everybody in that circle, Luton Selly circle, is aware of what this fellowship is about. So once the first routine is that once you enter into a politician's office at 9 o'clock, 8 o'clock, what happens that the politician has to give a bite or a news briefing to the respective media. So what happens that something has happened in the morning. For example, some politician has given a statement. So the media people will come that, sir, would you like to give a statement on this? So he'll ask you that, okay, prepare me and give me the background, that whether I should speak on this or not. Right. So for example, what happened that when I was working the Congress MP, the Congress lost the Karnataka election in 2018. So he asked me that, check out that what we can say in the positives. Okay, we have lost the elections, but what positive can be said? So positive means that our vote share increased, right? We got more votes. We are fighting on development and this and that. So what happens that the first thing that they ask you is that they have to give briefings to the media. So you have to back them with facts. That is the first thing. Second thing, what happens when this miscellaneous activities gets over, then the parliament has their own bifurcations. You have the question hour, you have the 0 hour, you have debates on bills. Everything is structured. For everybody who's watching this, please remember, parliament is not an unstructured institution. You have a very structured way of putting your points across. It's not that anybody can stand and say anything he wants. So your first task is to gauge you from your MP or analyze that what are the requirements of the MP later in the day, because he will sit with you only for 5 to 10 minutes. After that, he has to cater to all the visitors. He has to cater to parliament. He has to cater to other ancillary responsibilities that he has to discharge. So you have to. That is the morning time is the best, where he's relatively free and you can interact with him. because LAM fellowship is all about interacting with your MP. If you interact with your MP, then only you understand the system. Then only you understand how the parliament works. So from the morning, and always remember that there might be instances where you might leave at 6 o'clock in the evening, but there might be instances that you have to sleep at the MP's house also, because you'll have to work overnight for something that is coming tomorrow. So, for example, one of my batchmates who was working with a member of Parliament from Trinamool Congress, she was given a task to finish reading 4 books in one night, because the MP had a speech the day after. Right. So it was a joint exercise. Everybody was bifurcated. That okay, these are 4 books. You read 100 pages. You read 100 pages. You read 100 pages. You read 100 pages, and prepare a brief for that. So that was a very interesting thing to do. So there is a drawback. I would call it a drawback. That is the nature of the system, that your interaction with the MP is going to be very limited because of his personal obligations and personal commitments. So you have to derive the maximum out of your interaction with the MP and be very clear with him, and he'll be willing to listen to you. That is the best part of the members of Parliament, because they have been part of the fellowship for a long period of time. So and the best part is that by the end of the fellowship, and this is very unique, that you are invited for dinners and snacks and tea by various MPs. Right. So that's because through this I got to interact with Mr. Sharad Pawar once, because her daughter happens to be a member of Parliament and she had a LAM fellow. So what happens by the end of the fellowship, the LAM fellows sit together and they decide that okay, we'll talk to our MP and we'll want to have an interaction with all the rest of the LAM. So Mr. Shashi Tharoor, Ms. Supriya Sule, Mr. Anurag Thakur, now he's a minister, but when he was an MP, Mr. Rajiv Sata, Mr. Ravneet Singh Bittu, Mr. Jyotiraditya Scindia, everybody is going to host you for a dinner, a tea party or a snacks party at their respective residences. And they will interact with you, they'll understand your concern, they'll give you, so what happens that you get a perspective of other MPs also. And everybody, the Parliament is an institution where everybody is friends. What you see on TV, once you see them in an informal role, I'll quote a lot of informal incidences also later in the session, that there is so much of bonhomie and so much of friendship between people of across party lines that you cannot imagine. So that there is this whole group, there's a whole community of parliamentarians. So you interact with them and you learn a lot. So that is the best part of the fellowship, that not only you learn about the Parliament as an institution, but you also learn about the nature of a member of Parliament. So that is a very important aspect. And my last input on the routine of a LAM fellow is that if you are lucky enough, you will end into an MP who will probably treat you like a son or daughter. I've also come across MPs who have flown to their LAM's weddings. Right, because I had a LAM fellow batchmate who was married in Tamil Nadu and he was working with an Orissa MP, and that MP particularly flew to his wedding. After the fellowship, he flew to his wedding, attended the wedding, addressed the gathering in his wedding. So that is the amount of attachment you have with members of Parliament. After, even if you are not working in the field that I am working in, you go to a different place, but still that attachment continues. I have seen a lot of members of Parliament who have become ministers now. They have deputed their ex-LAM fellows into their ministries as consultants or as additional private secretaries. So you get a lot of exposure. You have a lot of, there's a lot of respect for LAM fellows. And when I end this session, I'll also play an audio visual for everybody, so you can watch that how the MPs have expressed their opinions about LAM fellowship. So you'll understand that how unique this fellowship is. And also I've seen members of Parliament that they have a routine of having lunch with their respective LAMs every day. And one MP was so, I'll say, he was so forgiving, so much, informal with his LAM, that he used to ask his LAM in the morning that what cuisine do you wish to have in the evening. So he used to instruct his cook that, okay, today he wants to have Mughlai, today he wants to have continental, today he wants to have South Indian, and that kind of food is made for him. Right, so there is that element of bonhomie also, and there is an element of mutual, what we call, the college that I study was called symbiosis, right? So it is a symbiotic relation also for the mutual benefit and coexistence of each other. So that is one of the best part of the LAM fellowship, and that is how the routine functions at for a lot of LAM fellows.
Very well explained in detail the life of Lamb Fellow from the work pressure, the kind of attention required, and the kind of duty and responsibility required to the kinds of cuisines also. Thank you so much for just such a nice explanation of the working of the Lamb Fellow. We would now turn to a very important aspect. And I would now take your feedback on your experience and how different way or interesting anecdotes or different way you can, in short, you can discuss with us, which are going to be a light and interactive and attractive aspects for the audience.
For a lamp fellow, most of the experiences I've shared in my previous answer only, but the unique experiences that I had as a lamp fellow was firstly to understand that how much diversified work profile of a member of parliament is. That was my biggest. I always say that lamp fellowship was an eye opener for me to not only understand policy but politics and parliament. All three aspects was something that was an eye opener for me for the lamp fellowship, because what happens that in India, the form of democracy that we live in, the window to understanding a politician is what the media tells us. There's a very restrictive window that that helps in understanding that what the media, what the politician does, how the life of a politician is. Right. So lamp fellowship, the most important experience that I gained was to understand the lifestyle of a member of parliament. So what does he do when he's in his constituency? What are the you have demands ranging from getting a confirmed railway ticket to getting an FIR registered in the local thana. Okay, and then you have and the worst part now, what happens that now we have the call recording facility on our mobile phones. So I've also come across instances that the person who's calling the MP also records the call. So the MP cannot be he cannot be brash or he cannot be abusive while talking on phone. There is so much of checks and balances that have come into place that the MP has to be very careful about what he speaks. Because what happens that I also engage in a discussion with a lot of my batchmates. I tell them that okay, your job, you are working in a corporate law firm, something goes over haywire or wrong, you might rectify it. Okay, that is not going to gain a lot of traction or attention. But if a MP does something wrong, if a politician does something wrong, that becomes a lot of problem for him. One wrong statement, and you are under scanner from all the quarters. So you have to be very careful with the words that you speak. It is we are always told that if you speak a lot, you either become a politician or either become a lawyer. But you have to understand that if you speak prudently, then only you become a politician. It's not about speaking a lot, it was speaking prudently. You have to be lucid, you have to be erudite. That is the best thing you have to do. So one of the biggest takeaway for me from the Lamb Fellowship was interacting with a diverse set of people. Because what happens when you're in a corporate law firm, you kind of interact with a lot of sophisticated class. Here's somebody who's very, very poor. He'll come up and say, I'm from your constituency, I want this work done. I want my admission in AIMS. I want sanction for money for cancer treatment of my wife. I have seen so many people who have been so much in trouble situations, and they come. I have seen people sitting and crying in front of MPs to get their work done. One instance where I was involved is that the son of a very poor farmer, he was a laborer. He was stranded in a Gulf country, and in Gulf country, what happens that they usually confiscate your passport. When there is something that wrong happens, they confiscate your passport. Now my MP deputed me that please take care of this, go to the Ministry of External Affairs also with him and see what can be done. So he started crying in front of me that please, he's my only son, he has a lot of medical issues, they are not letting him in. And I sorted that issue. I use social media to a lot of my, to the benefit of solving the grievance, because you lodge that complaint in the Ministry of External Affairs required. And once his problem was solved, it was a very satisfying experience. And he blessed me that I wish that you achieve whatever you want to do in your life, because you have solved a very big problem for me. So okay, financial remuneration is one part, but getting the blessings of people on getting their work done is something that you need to understand. And there are a lot of lessons that you learn, because I remember when I got irritated at one point of time because he was very angry, and I also had to do some parliamentary work. So I said that I will have to meet the minister. And there was one gentleman who was sitting in my office, and he told me something that still stuck in my mind, and I always keep that in mind whenever I take up any grievance of somebody who comes to an MP. I said that this cannot happen. It's a Gulf country. Things might take a lot of time. It is difficult to meet the external affairs minister. So he said that gentleman told me that you should try and always remember hope is a very big thing. If you imbibe hope in that person that you can get his son back, he will have a reason to live. If you straight away say that I will not do this job, he will be shattered beyond belief, and you will somewhere regret that thing at the later point of time in your life. If you have resources at your end, even if it is 10%, use that resource and try and get him relief that he wants. So that was one of the very major experiences. And the second best experience was that my MP was very interactive. He used to share a lot of his personal anecdotes also. So whenever I used to sit with him, I used to ask him that how did you enter into politics? Why did you do that? What are your plans? So they have a very easy conversation with him. They'll joke with you. They'll tell you anecdotes. So you have for example, if you do a clerkship with a judge, or if you work with a lawyer, you cannot afford to be very complacent with them. There will always be a formal relationship. With MPs, you can always, have a very informal relation, to the extent that I remember one MP took his LAMP fellow to Malaysia with him, with an all-sponsored trip. He had gone for a conference and he took his LAMP as well. So that's a very interesting, it's a mixture of a casual and a formal relationship between our MP and the LAMP fellow. So that has been a very brilliant experience for me.
That's a very nice way of explaining the other parts of the life of a LAMP fellow. I would take, because I think many students were attending classes since morning. So we will take this as a last question until some students have a question. So now I would be asking a very important question, because this is how for which I have been more motivated, that how career after LAMP shapes up in various perspectives, in various areas, in various ways, how a LAMP fellow can look up to or make up his career, or think of making his career, or what kind of openings. Few of these you have highlighted, and if you think that there are a few which remain to be conveyed, it would be very good from your side.
Yes, sir. This forms a very important question, for the reason because most of the people who apply for LAMP fellowship have this question in mind, that what are we deriving out of it after 11 months down the line? What are the advantages, or what are the avenues that it opens up for most of us after we are done with it? So the first thing, I'll highlight 5 things which you can do. Apart from that, there are a lot of other avenues that I'll go through. The first thing that I've seen most of the people who pursue from my batch, they either go for their masters to a very reputed institution like Harvard, Kennedy, Yale, Cambridge. So because what happens that a lot of them are in their age group of 21 to 25. So they have their, that window is open for them to pursue an additional degree. And what happens that the recommendation letter of a member of parliament, or the certificate of being a LAMP fellow, it has a very strong credential for you to getting admitted into one of the very prominent institutions who teach public policy. Now the problem with India is that we do not have a very specified course on public policy which specializes you. Whereas if you go in foreign jurisdictions, US, UK, every university has a course on public policy. So the first thing that people do, that they take up a master's degree in a foreign country, whether it's Cambridge, it's Yale, it's Harvard, it's Stanford, it's other reputed universities. Secondly, what happens, the second most upcoming thing is what you've stated earlier in your introductory remarks, is the advent and the growth of NGOs and think tanks. Now, what is the job of a think tank? The think tank works on a sector, like for example, Niti Aayog. Niti Aayog is a think tank. Now, Niti Aayog acts as an advisor to the government of India on policy matters, whether that's agriculture, whether that's rural development, whether that's highways, whether that's sports and shippings, whether that's home affairs or any other thing. So what kind of professionals do Niti Aayog require? They require people who understand how policy is framed, people who understand how parliament functions, and people who understand the ground realities of policy making in India. So the second most lucrative career is of think tanks. Now what happens that once you work with think tanks, I have seen a lot of people working in think tanks being absorbed by respective ministries. So the ministries have also called on for consultant legal, consultant policy. You will see a lot of vacancies coming up where you are attached with the respective ministry, where you advise them on these things. So the first thing is that you either go for a master's degree, then you go on for a policy think tank. And in this, there are a lot of broad horizons. You can work with a research-based think tank like CPR or PRS. You can work with a think tank which is towards reforms. You can work with a think tank like Population Foundation of India, which works towards health and menstrual hygiene. You can work with a ministry in that policy division. The third thing is that you get associated with a law firm, or you go into a corporate setup, because all the corporates have their policy team. Because the problem is that now we see a very relevant example that has come up, that once the farm laws came in, everybody's alleging that this has been done to benefit few companies. Right, there are few organizations for whose benefit these laws have been brought into force. Now those companies must have had the policy team. They must have lobbied with the government to tell them that, okay, the government is not going to bring any law until unless they don't understand that whether it is feasible for them to implement that law or not. They would have, because in India lobbying is illegal and it's considered a bad term. But if we go to US, it is a purely legal aspect. You have so many lobbyists, people appoint a lot of lobbyists, and as you said in Quantum of Solace, he was an environmentalist, but he was a lobbyist also. So in US, there is a formal institutional attachment of a lobbyist who lobbies or who interacts with the government to frame policies which are to their benefit. So we have to understand that in India also, it might not happen, in a very overt manner, but covertly and in a very tacit manner, there is a lot of interaction that happens between government officials and respective corporate houses. Because you cannot do business without government regulations. There is not a single line of business in this country which can be done without government regulations, either at the center or at the state. So until unless the policies are not clear, until unless the policies are not well framed, how are you going to increase investment? How is the investment climate going to better in a country like India, which is growing with the passage of time, which is opening up its sector? So for example, tomorrow, we've seen a lot of, we were a closed economy till 1991. But in the last 20 years, when the economy has gradually opened up, we have seen people entering into defense, into telecommunications, into automobile industry. Gradually, things have started coming in. Why? Because the policies were made. How were the policies made? Because there were industrial representations that came in. Until and unless the industrial players don't come in, and for that they'll either approach a law firm or they'll have their own policy team. We saw a lot of dispute that happened with the Facebook policy chief, who came into a lot of scanner for Facebook being lenient to a particular political party for hate speeches. So that is the impact, and that is the level of influence that they hold. So once you enter into the policy vertical of a particular company, it helps you in understanding that economics and policy goes hand in hand. You cannot, tomorrow if Reliance wants to set up a refinery, it cannot do it on its own. It will have to take care of government regulations. If the government says that, okay, you are not eligible, what will you do? For that, you will have to tell them that, sir, we have this capacity, we have the infrastructure, we have the technology to set up a refinery, which is an extremely complex process. So economics and I'll say business sense goes hand in hand. And that is where lawyers have an upper hand, because you understand business also, you understand law also, you understand the current situation also. So these are all the three things that happen. Nextly, sir, if I talk about the next, as I said, that you can work in a law firm. Now, a lot of law firms have their policy teams, because a lot of corporates outsource their policy work to law firms. So you have PLR chambers, policy and law review chambers, which does core policy work. You have Ikigai Law, which does core tech policy work. You have a lot of other law firms which are completely into policy work, and gradually they're expanding their team. Because government affairs is something, everything is dependent on that. Whether it's litigation, whether it's corporate, whether it's policy, everything flows from the parliament. You cannot bypass that institution. Because if they stop making laws, if they stop putting out regulations, no business is going to function. And that is why we say that in politics there is the concept of recession doesn't apply to politicians. You can have recession in every field, but you will never have recession in politics. That is a cardinal principle of this particular profession. That there is money, but it is always on your capability to make that money out of it.
And also retirement.
And also retirement is also not there, and you are always young in politics.
Exactly.
There is no old age, and I for this particular thing, there was a very senior leader of Congress who passed away a few days back, Mr. Motilal Vora. So I remember when he retired from the Rajya Sabha in March in 2020. So the last line that he said in his retirement, he said that he quoted the poem of Robert Frost. He said that the woods are lovely, dark and deep, and I have a lot of promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. And he was 94 at that point of time. He said, I have a lot of work to do till now only. I don't know till when I'll survive, but till the time I'm surviving, I'll always strive and work hard.
Very well.
So that is the very exciting, that is the zest and the stamina that politicians have till the age of 92, 93, 94. That they fight elections, they become representative. And one very interesting, it's a little off topic, but it's a very interesting anecdote that I came across in the parliament. And since you also are very fond of shairi and all, so a lot of shairi also happens in the parliament. So I remember Mr. Ghulam, and the shairi reflects that how much appreciation people have for their opponents also. So I remember Mr. Ghulam Nabi Azad, it is the ritual of the Rajya Sabha, it's a convention that whenever the members of parliament retire after the 6 years of tenure, the leader of opposition gives a speech for everybody. So everybody tells them that how interaction has been. So there was a leader of Bharatiya Janata Party from Madhya Pradesh, Mr. Satyanarayan Jatia. He was in the parliament for close to 20 years, been a union minister also earlier. So Mr. Ghulam Nabi, he said my association with him dates back to 1977. For 43 years, we have been friends. We've come across different political parties. And he said that for his nature, I'll recite a share what Mirza Ghalib said, कि इतने शीरीन है तेरे लब के रकीब कि गाली खा के बेमजा ना हुआ. Which means that you speak in such a soft and wonderful tone that even when I have argued with you, there has not been bitter taste left in my mouth. So there have been such and they have been such good friends. And one more anecdote was between Mr. Arun Jaitley, the late Arun Jaitley, who's considered as one of the most distinguished parliamentarians that the country has seen. And for everybody, even if you go to the Lamb Fellowship or not, I recommend everybody of you to watch his speeches on YouTube. You'll sense that how erudite, how to the point, how witty, how including everything. He quotes everything, whether it's shairi and everything, he used to quote everything. And there was a very famous banter between Jairam Ramesh and Arun Jaitley, where Jairam Ramesh said that he was also retiring in 2014. So he said that, sir, Vijay Merchant said that for retirement, he said that you should retire when people say why and why not. So Mr. Jaitley immediately stood up and said, Mr. Jairam Ramesh, I understand that you are a very distinguished parliamentarian, but this quote was said by Sunil Gavaskar and not Vijay Merchant. Sunil Gavaskar said that you should retire when people ask you why and not why not. So that is the level of you see a lot of humor also happening in the parliament. These are very interesting things that happen. And the final, I think there are a lot of other avenues also that you can do. But one of the final avenues is a law firm. And apart from this also, it helps you in litigation also. If you wish to go into litigation, your fellowship helps you understand, because for any law that is challenged, there is a legislative competence, legislative backing that is always written in the judgment. What we call as reasonable nexus and the objectives sought to be achieved. So until unless you do not understand how law is made, how do you challenge a law? And that is the reason why most of the distinguished lawyers turn into politics after some point of time in their age. And that is why you see a lot of distinguished lawyers sitting in the Rajya Sabha or Lok Sabha and speaking their house out. Yeah. And the best part of the parliament is that I have not seen an institution anywhere in this world where you have so many diverse people sitting in one chamber. you have an Olympic gold medalist like Rajavardan Singh Rathod. You have a stand-up comedian like Mr. Bhagwant Mann. You have a reporter in Syed Imtiaz Jaleel. You have a cricketer like Gautam Gambhir. You have an actor like Hema Malini. You have a retired army chief like General V.K. Singh. You tell me any organization which has so diverse set of people who can give so diverse perspectives about everything else. So these are the avenues that you have, and the best part is that the avenues might sound limited to you, but once you enter into this field, you will understand that the dimensions and the horizon is very broad. One day you're working on education, one day you're working on agriculture, one day you're working on highways, one day you're working on CA, one day you're working on cantonment boards, one day you're working on defense acquisitions. There's no limitation to your work. So it's such a multi-dimensional thing that once you move out of it, everybody is going to take you hands-on, irrespective of whatever your degree is, because you understand the institution from where everything flows.
Very well. Very well. Thank you so much for such a diverse 360-degree perspective of LAMP fellowship and working in the parliament. And I hope everyone must have enjoyed the session. I can see many people are. So if someone have a question, I can only take one question. Oh, Aditya have question. Okay, let's take only 3 questions. Okay, Aditya have a question.
There are some in the chat box also, sir. If they're related, I'll link them up and then I'll answer.
I think you have already answered those questions, because whatever I see, that are answered.
Okay.
Aditya Dubey. Aditya.
Thank you, sir, for this very good session, sir. My question is: suppose a student is working with a political party, like working in the research team of a political party, or working in a public relation or a social media team of a political party. So, will that help that student when he's applying for the LAMP fellowship, or will that basically help that student to frame the statement of purpose?
You asked a very good question, Aditya. See, the answer to your question is, first of all, if you look at the application form of the LAMP fellowship, it also has a column of additional responsibilities or organizational work that you have done. Right.
Okay.
If you check that form, you have a column on that of what organizations have been associated to, what extracurricular have you done. That helps you a lot. Why do I say this? Because you have an understanding of politics. So you are far more of your peers who other people are applying, because you understand the sense of how politics works and how a political party presents its views, or somebody that has been how policies are made or how a politician works. Yes, that's a very big added advantage, because any person who's judging your application will immediately have his attention will be immediately concentrated towards your CV and your application. He will immediately ask you the question that you worked on this XYZ company's team, political party's team. What were your learnings out of it? And also make sure of the fact that it should not reflect your political leanings. When you are going for a LAMP fellowship interview, you are going as a candidate and not as for seeking an election ticket. Right? So you do not have to be lenient towards your ideology. You have to be very clear why do you want to appear as appear or apply for the LAMP fellowship as a very, very qualified individual. It's a profession, right? How do you work it around it as a profession? So you have to be very clear on the fact that I have worked with a research team and this is what I've learned. I hope that answers your question, Aditya, or is there something else you want to know?
Very well answered. Rishabh have a question. Rishabh.
Yes, sir. I didn't want to ruin the intellectual atmosphere over here by being very technical, but I wanted to know that I am willing to apply this time, and I want to know if we can write an essay on a draft notification, whether that comes under the ambit of policy or law, because in the essay there is written write 500 words on any policy or law. So does a draft notification come under a policy?
Your question is very relevant, and it's good that you are going out of the way and thinking out of the box while writing your article on the policy issue. See, policy is a very broad-based term. Right? If you are writing on something on a draft notification, that is also going to kind of reflect upon the policy or any aim that the government seeks to fulfill. Right. So whether it's a draft notification, for example, if I'm just making a wild guess if this draft notification might be on the EIA, the Environmental Impact Assessment, which was under a lot of debate, or it might be on some other issue. But the broad fact is that any policy any draft notification that also you write upon, that will also have a legislative history. Right. So there is no, I'll say, boundation or restriction on writing about something that is in its draft form, because it will eventually get discussed, and it will be, any draft notification is always placed in public domain to be discussed. So it also forms a part of a policy, and you can definitely go ahead with it. But ensure that about the draft notification, you are very clear, and you are also clear about the background of the draft notification, why it has been brought into place, what it seeks to achieve, what are the essentials of the draft notification, and which ministry has particularly brought that draft notification. If anybody else has any question.
Anyone have any question? Please raise your hand. Anyone? Pravi, there are some questions in the chat box if you can see.
Yes, sir, I can see that. Just a second.
Govind have a question. Devyesh Tripathi have a question. No, Devyesh is only saying thank you. 1318 symbiosis.
Yes, sir. Glad to have him. I hope we could have a session on dramatics by him soon.
We will surely have a session on but he is also a good lawyer, not only
a lawyer needs to learn a lot of drama.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
He is good in dramatics. I'm sure he's going to be an exceptionally good lawyer also.
Govind have a question. Kindly take this.
Yes, I'll just second. So Govind has asked that my query is that do candidates have an option of selecting a MP, or is the allotment done on a random basis? See, for this is a very general query that most of the people ask, that whether you have a choice of getting a LAMP, but it's totally a random process. But yes, there are certain aspects that the PRS people take into consideration while allotting a LAMP fellow to a particular MP. The first thing is that you have to see, there are female MPs, right? So in a female MP's office, she is far more, I'll say, very much comfortable with having a female LAMP. Because there are options. Because in a male MP's office, the gentry is somewhere, because in a politician's office, as I said, normally anybody can walk in. So what happens that a female MP might not be very comfortable with sitting around those people. It is some sort of a difficulty also at times, and it becomes a difficulty also because I've told you, with a male MP, if the office is full, I can stand out, but with a female MP, it becomes a lot of a problem. So what happens that there are very few, one or two considerations that happen. The first consideration is that female MPs do get female lamps most of the times. So female MPs have that thing. But what happens that as a lawyer, I'll tell you, you are into a very advantageous position, because what happens that there are a lot of MPs who have a preference of having a lawyer only. They restrict themselves that I will have a lawyer only. Some are that they'll have an engineer only. But what happens that most 90 to 95% of the allotments are totally random. There is no specified agenda that is given to that is in place to allot an MP. It's clearly very much clear on the fact that okay, this MP has this requirement, but they are not very compartmentalized about it. So it's a very random thing that happens.
One thing I would say in the conclusion of this session, that today all of you must have got to know that Parliament and parliamentarians works. It is not that what is being told to us or what has been projected to us, that it is only time pass, or it is only siphoning the money of the exchequer by taking hundreds and crores of rupees. It is a serious work, and if you are serious, then there are many more things to do. If anyone have question, kindly raise the hand, and otherwise we will end the session.
There's one question I'll just answer in the chat box.
Yes.
He has asked that there is a lot of work in LAMP, and how does one balance LLB and LAMP? Right. So for that information, LAMP fellowship happens after you complete your graduation. So it's not simultaneous.
Yeah, exactly.
Once you complete your graduation, the training starts in the mid of June, and it goes on to April in the next year. So that is the cycle of LAMP fellowship. So you don't have to worry about it. It happens after your graduation.
Exactly. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for a good Thursday evening. And I hope this session must have served as a good evening tea and a good evening kind of a cookie tea session and coffee tea session for you. And this is really enjoying and entertaining and very knowledgeable for me personally. And I hope it is very informative and very eye-opening and very enjoying for every one of you. And I hope by this session, this is our third session on LAMP, I must have to tell you. And I just wish that few of our students must have to take it up, and they should proceed. And Mr. Praveer is here, Harsh is here, many more people are here to guide you on personal basis also. So if you are looking to do any such take up these endeavors, be in touch with Praveer, Harsh, or you. I can connect to them. So good luck to all of you. Thank you so much, Praveer, for your time.
Just before I conclude, I have a short 4-minute video that I would want everybody to see.
Yeah, for sure. Please play the same. I'm making you the host.
There's a short video about what the parliamentarians say about their respective
Perfect.
LAMP fellows. It will help you in understanding
Perfect.
that how.
Perfect. Praveer, with your permission, I will take a pause for 5 minutes.
Yes, sir.
I would give the authority to Rishabh Ranjan. He will close the session. I have to attend one important thing at home. I will take a pause of 5 minutes. I will join back. Or if the things ends in between, Rishabh is here. He will end the session with you.
It's a 5-minute video, sir. I think.
Perfect.
I'll do that. And thank you so much. First of all, thank you so much, sir, for the invitation. It has been a pleasure addressing so many students, and I hope they take back a lot of informative advice, and this coffee doesn't turn like coffee with Karan without any substance.
No. It is really very enjoying and very knowledgeable. I must have to say that I enjoyed and I been informed a lot in this session.
Thank you so much, sir. And it is wonderful that the students also participated on.
Yes.
Taken a lot of questions. It was a wonderful session, and I look forward to.
Thank you so much.
Now I'll just play a short video for everybody, and then.
Sure.
After, if anybody has any question, I'll answer, and then
I've made the host. You can play the same.
I'll do that. Thank you so much, sir. So this is a video for everybody, just a short video, and I hope everybody can see this. Rishabh, can you see the video?
Your institution is an institution that actually has raised the bar for not only public debate, but I think more importantly, public service in India. I think all of us parliamentarians would join me in giving you and your institution a round of applause. The reason why we sound so erudite, or rather, at least the reason why I sound so erudite, if I do, is all because of Seher.
It's a real pleasure to be here and an honor to be here for PRS, because PRS अगर नहीं होता तो मुझे तो समझ में नहीं आता है कि मैं पहले साल से क्या करती. It's very difficult for a first time MP to get to know and to put in that many questions, to put in that many, to find out that do that much research and be there present in Parliament and be there for a constituency, for the Lok Sabha ones. It's extremely difficult.
Like a yearly thing, you do good things every year, and this is one of the good things that I feel that makes me very happy is this LAMP program of the PRS. Everybody thinks Supriya, it's PRS and the LAMP which is performing. So I owe all my performance to all the hard work Ankita does, and I think I've been a part of this program for the last almost 4 or 5 years. I don't know how many times I have to bully Madhavan to make sure I get a LAMP. So I think now, there was a time where you had to use beg, plead to get an admission. Now I have to beg, borrow, plead, do everything to get a LAMP. I think that's where we are.
Every MP feels that he or she got the best LAMP. Am I right? See that? Every one of us. So, never settle for less. Never compromise with your values, and these are not sermons. You may say that what are we doing in Parliament? That's a different story. But this is where the character building takes place. I think collectively we have got to work and recognize and respect this talent. I wish you all the best. Sakshi was my lamb, and I think whatever Supriya Shule may say, but Sakshi, you are the best.
मैं कहना चाहूँगा कि ये बच्चे हम लोगों के काम को तो आसान करते ही हैं, खुशी भी देते हैं, लेकिन साथ साथ गम भी देते हैं। आपको आश्चर्य होगा गम क्या दे हैं। जब ये आते हैं हम लोगों के को इतना आसान कर देते हैं, लेकिन जब से इसने मुझे कहा कि मेरा अब समय खत्म हो रहा है और ये मेरा लास्ट है, तो इतने जुड़ जाते हैं, इतना अपनापन देते हैं, इतना लगाव हो जाता है इन बच्चों से कि जैसे ही सुनता हूं कि अब ये मेरे साथ नहीं रहेगा, तो वाकई वो क्षण मतलब अच्छा नहीं लगता।
Madhavan, Chakshu, the entire team, you have built PRS into something that is truly outstanding. India desperately needed something like this. I have argued many times that compared to other democracies, our MPs don't even get offices, let alone research staff. And so no wonder the performance that is expected of MPs was often not there to be seen. The LAMP cohort has completely changed that. So
this was a very enriching one, sir. Matlab, one can live the experience of completing LAMP and they're getting their reviews. It was like that. Thank you so much, sir. There was a question regarding your email ID. Sir has already wrote that email ID in the chat box. Thank you, sir. We would disturb you again if we will need you, and we'll get in touch with you.
If anybody has any concluding questions.
If anyone has, you can please raise your so that I mute them. I don't think there are more queries, sir. This was a very detailed introduction and a session, detailed session of the.
Gaurav Kumar that I can see in the chat box. So, yeah, it says that every MP does really have a hectic schedule. Well, see that's dependent. As I said that MPs are also like Bollywood actors. Akshay Kumar does 4 films a year, and there are certain actors who do just 1 movie a year. So not all MPs are the same. Everybody has their different limitations. But one thing is very sure for I can say that for Lok Sabha MPs, that their schedule is hectic because they have to be in their constituency for most period of the time. For the Rajya Sabha people, they do not, they do not have a lot of constituency related obligations because they are sent from the respective states. So for the lifetime or the timetable of a Rajya Sabha MP is far more lesser hectic than a Lok Sabha MP. But it is my personal experience that you get to learn more from a Lok Sabha MP because he's amongst the people. He has a lot of obligations to pursue, but that's not the case. Rajya Sabha MPs are mostly intellectual people. That is why if you see the constitution, Rajya Sabha is usually called the House of Elders or the Council of States. So that is why you have more intellectual based people, or the other people that I very jokingly say that Rajya Sabha is like the Manrega for politicians. So if somebody loses a Lok Sabha election and he's prominent enough, he gets into the Rajya Sabha at the later point of time. So I think that is something that that's a difference. That difference will always be there in the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha MP. But with a Rajya Sabha MP, one standout factor is that he goes into a lot of TED talks or seminars or I'll say webinars and all, because they are more Delhi based, so they participate more in these events as compared to Lok Sabha MPs. And there are, I think, 2 questions that are MPs like a Eid Ka Chand. I think you have an option of having a lunar eclipse for him in the next election then. And lastly, the question is that do LAMP scholars also get stipend during this period? And one MP has 1 LAMP or more than that. So one MP has just 1 LAMP. And second, yes, you do get a stipend also. The amount I will not disclose it right now. I'll leave it to PRS to decide and tell you people once you clear the fellowship. But you get a stipend which is far more than other fellowships also. So I think this is the thing, and I think once you go back, irrespective of whether you have a LAMP fellowship, whether you apply or not, go and at least check that who's your MLA and who's your MP, and check how has he performed till now. If not for anything else, for your own, knowledge addition, to understand that who is representing you in that, such a big institution, and who's raising your voices, and whether, and since you are a law student, you can also, if you are proactive enough, you can go and meet them and tell them that, okay, I have these issues, I would help you in a private member's bill, I would want you to raise these issues. So that will also help him out, and it will also be a personal interaction and a connection for you also.
Yeah, exactly. Any other question from anyone? Rishabh, anything to say? Yeah.
No, sir, this was a very detailed one. I got an idea about the application process and the experience, which that this was a very lively experience which sir shared. So I told him that we'll disturb him again if we need him.
For sure. Very good. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Rishabh. Thank you so much, Pravi, for
It's an honor to be
enlightening session, and really enjoying, really benefiting to all of us. And with this, I hope many students must have. We have successfully sown seed of an aspiration for LAM fellowship in many more first year, second year, third year, fourth year students who will start applying in their final years. And this is something which we want, that we want to change our political setup, but we don't want to contribute. It is not good. We want change from others. However, change will happen when we will contribute to the same. And LAM fellowship is a kind of contribution from our side, educated people, to bring change to the political setup the way it has to be catering to the society as a whole. And this is extremely beneficial initiative, I must have to say. And thank you so much, Praveer, for the same. Thank you for all your time and support to our students. And
thank you to all the participants for being so proactive. That helped me putting a lot of things that I would have not thought of before preparing for the session.
Yeah,
I spoke on a lot of things, so that was extremely. And I urge everybody, we have the budget session coming in the next 20 days. So do follow that if you are applying in the last year. So do follow the budget, because it's going to be it is coming at a very challenging point of time, and it will have we are expecting a lot of revolutionary announcements. Let's see how it goes about, but it does come at a very challenging time. So
this is going to be a budget of a century, once for a century.
Budget of a century. I think the last that Manmohan Singh presented, after that probably this is going to be the most sought after or looked after budget that we are going to see in this particular for the next decade, and it is going to shape up. So I urge everybody to, even as a layman, we will help you in because for everybody, those of you don't know that budget is a constitutional provision. Yeah. You have to look up Article 111(12). That is where the provision of the budget is there. So it's not something that flows out of the whims and fancies of the government. It is something that is enshrined in the constitution, albeit in a very structured manner. Yeah. So I urge everybody to, because what happens after the budget, there is a very, I tell a lot of politicians also that there's a set format that half of them will say that the budget was very good. It brought a relief to common man. The corporates will be happy. Half would say that it is anti-government, anti-farmer, anti-common man. So don't go on that. That is only what the surface of it. Analyze the budget and analyze whatever announcement the finance minister makes.
Yeah, exactly.
She'll speak for a marathon of 2.5 hours. So follow that, you'll understand that how this process works. That is just the beginning of you to understand that how the process of parliament works.
Exactly. Thank you so much. Good evening and good luck to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.